When Jane Fonda was planning a home movie that summed up her life for her 60th birthday, one of her daughters told her, "Why not just film a chameleon?" You can see her point. A career spanning 6 decades has seen Jane changing from sex kitten to political activist, to successful producer, to queen of the fitness video. On the way, she picked up 2 Oscars and became the most divisive figure in Hollywood. Admired for her acting, but loathed by many Americans for her outspoken opposition to the Vietnam War. And throughout all this were the pressures and privileges that came with her famous family name.
Was that good news for you in terms of your career, because the name Fonda got you started, or was it also a bit of a curse?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's 9% good and 1% bad. Especially over the last 50 years, the competition is very, heavy when it comes to trying to make it in movie business. It's a talented and competitive field. So anything that allows you to kind of stand above the others and have people take notice of you, which having a famous parent does, is all to the good. It can get you in the door. It doesn't keep you there. You have to have talent to keep you there. The only 1% negative would be there's always the tendency subjectively to feel I've only got this because I'm Henry Fonda's daughter. And so how I coped with that is I worked extra hard. I instead of going to 1 class a week at the Actors Studio, I'd go to 4, and do 5 scenes instead of 3, and so that I could always, I knew at least inside me that I wasn't a dilettante.
Jane always said she had no intention of following in her father's footsteps and dreamt of being a writer or a painter. But then encouragement from outside the family set her on a career path that to everyone else looked inevitable.
I was out here with my father one summer, and Lee Strasberg, who was the founder of the Actors Studio, which brought the Stanislavski method to America. It was the method. It was what trained Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift and all those, and he was the head of the Actors Studio. He was out here with Marilyn Monroe, working with her on Some Like It Hot. And his daughter said to me, "You should be in Lee's classes. You should study with Lee." I said, "I'm not an actress." She said, "You should be." And finally, she convinced me to be interviewed by him. And I'll never forget. He told me later, he said, what I saw was this very proper, repressed, uptight, middle-class young woman. And the only giveaway was my eyes. He said, "Your eyes were filled with fear and vulnerability, and that's why I decided to take you." So I went back to New York and I began studying with him. Now you got to understand, I'm living with my father. My father hates acting school. My father still believes that people should do it the way he did. It was actually the right move for me to go to school, but it was an act of rebellion and a personal threat against him. He was very, very, very angry with me for doing this. So here I was leaving his home, going to study, coming back, practicing my sense memory exercises in front of him, with him glaring at me. And eventually my turn came to do a scene. Scared to death, and when it was over, Lee just sat there, and he looked at me, and he said to me, "You have real talent." And with those words, my whole life changed. Literally, I'm not kidding. It was like the roof came off my head. It was like the sun came out. It wasn't my father, because I'd been in some plays with him, but he was my father. He had to tell me I was good. This man who had seen all these people go by told me I was talented. Well, that was the beginning of the end. I mean, I suddenly knew what I wanted to. I just needed that encouragement.
Jane's biggest early successes came in the 60s with Cat Ballou and Barefoot in the Park, which both earned her praise and award nominations for her comedy skills.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Next time you're in New York, just call me up.
Towards the end of the decade, Jane moved to France and married the director Roger Vadim. He had helped turn Brigitte Bardot into an international sex symbol and pretty much did the same for Jane, when she appeared in his sci-fi fantasy Barbarella. But the film's release coincided with her first big transformation. In cinemas, she was writhing around in zero gravity. In interviews, she was sometimes struggling awkwardly to explain how that tallied with her political awakening as a feminist.
One of the objectives of the women's liberation movement is to attack the position of women as what they call sex objects. Now, that's exactly what you have been in many of your films, Barbarella, for example. Does your new attitude mean that you will no longer appear in motion pictures of that kind?
Yeah, I will not be making films like that anymore. I had never, I wasn't really aware of male chauvinism and of myself as being
Tell me this, aren't you married to a male chauvinist? I would have thought Vadim
I think that all men are male chauvinists, and poor dears, not because they mean to be, but because that's the way we've all been educated. And women have always allowed themselves to be put into a subordinate position. That's just, I mean, for centuries, that's the way we have been educated and raised.
But surely Vadim is the male chauvinist par excellence.
Oh no, not really. He, it would seem that way, but in fact it's not, I would say that he is no more guilty of male chauvinism than most men that I know.
My God, he made Vadim into a sex symbol. He made you into a sex symbol.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the way one relates on a personal level on a day-to-day life.
Vadim was the first of Jane's 3 husbands, but the most important man in her life was always her father, Henry, one of America's favorite sons, and along with a few friends, genuine Hollywood royalty.
And your father was a big star. Did you see much of him? Wasn't he away working all the time?
He was away at war, mostly. I mean, that was the growing up, was losing him at the beginning of the war and getting him back when the war ended. He was gone almost the entire time in the Navy, in the Pacific. But before that, he was at home a lot, but he would become different people. He'd be a swashbuckler for 3 months. In those days, it took less time to make a movie. He could make 4 movies in a year. He'd be a Western cowboy, and then suddenly he'd be a very elegant businessman. And but of course, we took it for granted. We didn't think it was strange because everybody else's father sort of did the same thing.
Yeah, they were all actors too, eh?
But he brought it home. I mean, his best friends were Ward Bond and John Wayne and John Ford with a patch on his eye, and they would play a game. I can't even remember. It was a very strange card game. And they would wear pistols and holsters, and they would come and sit around this big round table, you know, with their pistols. They'd take the pistols out and put it on the table and play this game. The guys with their beer. That all ended when the McCarthy hearings started. They stopped speaking to each other. But Dad's best friend was Jimmy Stewart. They became friends when they were struggling and literally starving actors in New York. They lived together, lived on rice for about a year, from what I can understand. And so when they both made it and came to California, Jimmy, who was a bachelor forever, lived in we had a little kind of a playhouse. And he lived there when he would come back from the war. He was in the Air Force. And he would come back at Christmas, and he would be Santa Claus, although at the time I didn't know that. And I remember Dad would put bells on Jimmy's feet, and Jimmy would run across the roof, clump, 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 and we would think it was Santa Claus coming.
Your father was all his life a sort of presidential magisterial figure. He had this great command.
In a way, because he was very remote, very shy, very quiet, very unexpressive. Not entirely like the character on Golden Pond, but somewhat similar. You never could quite get enough of what you wanted. There was no bouncing on the knees and very little expression of a very elusive kind of a character. And so, you know, a child, I adored him, I worshipped him, and I created a monument. Presidential, if you will, but definitely out of reach. It was a challenge. I think until I was well into my 30s, I would somehow judge everything I did according to what he would think of it.
Despite the need to please her father, Jane was definitely not interested in acquiring his presidential status. By the early 70s, she was defiantly campaigning against the Vietnam War, despite the fact her actions turned many people against her and could potentially have ruined her acting career.
Oh, I think you're right. I think I am different. Changes don't happen overnight. I've, over a period of years, particularly the last 2 years, been turning my eyes outward and becoming more aware of what is happening around me. Partly because of myself and partly because of what is happening around me. I grew up in the 50s. I was a student in the 50s, when it was pretty easy for a white middle-class girl, privileged girl, as I was and am, to think that things were all right, that America was working, that we lived in a viable democratic system. So anyway, what I'm saying is that I became, particularly over the last year and a half, I've become aware of people who are less fortunate than I, of what the system is doing to us here in America, all over the world, but particularly in America.
Tell me this, do you think that this new interest of yours in civil rights is going to damage your career as an actress?
No, I don't think so. This isn't the McCarthy period. It may damage my life. In the McCarthy period, people just lost their jobs. Today, people are being put in jail and killed and shot and all kinds of things that are much more serious. I don't think that my career is going to be hurt. We may all end up in jail one day, the way things are going.
Has the FBI shown any interest in your activities, personally?
Yes, of course, yeah. The FBI has been to see my husband and my brother and my father. And, that's
Now,
to
you
be
say
expected.
these activities of yours, you don't think that they endanger your professional career. And yet, let's put it like this. If it came to a decision between your career and your civil rights work, which would come first? I know that's a very hard question because it would depend on the circumstances. But let's put it like this. If there was a question of doing something you felt you should do, which might mean going to jail, and going to jail might mean that you wouldn't do the picture which you're assigned to do, would you go to jail?
I'm not doing anything for which I can actually go to jail for. Today in America, anyone who is doing anything involving root changes in this country can go to jail.
Right.
And so I cannot stop doing what I'm doing. I am involved in things because I know that without that involvement on the part of everyone, there will be no world anymore.
Let me put it like this.
Nowhere. And so to be safe today in America, it means you have to be Bob Hope, if you're an actor, or that you have to do, or nothing at all. And I don't think that that's a viable way of living. I don't think that anyone can live that way today when things are so crucial. So it may mean that I go to jail. I will certainly be in good company if that happens.
Jane's choices around this time reflected her more serious take on life. Gone was any sign of light comedy, replaced by intense dramas like the 1969 film They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which earned her first Oscar nomination.
I wanted to shed the Barbarella armament, whatever. It was the first time that I was really taken seriously as a dramatic actress. The world was changing. I had experienced 1968. This was the first time in my life that I was asked to do a movie that was about society, that was a critique of American society. It had something to say. It was right after that that I became an activist.
When Jane failed to win the Oscar, there was speculation that her recent arrest on the military base had cost her the award. If that had been the case, the Academy had clearly forgiven her 2 years later, when she won the Best Actress Award for her role in the thriller Clute, playing a New York prostitute. She delivered what many felt was the best performance of her career.
Clute was funny, you know, when between the time I accepted to do Clute and when I actually did it, I began to identify myself as a feminist. And I began to think, I can't play. This is this part of the early women's movement, right? I can't play a whore, it's not correct. And I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? It's not appropriate for me to play a whore. And finally, one of my wiser feminist friends said, all you have to do is make her real. All you have to do is really show all the different layers that make up a woman who does this. And so I did. And I thought I was able to bring something to the performance that I would not have brought if I had not been a feminist. In Clute, for example, the scene when I'm finally face to face with the guy that's going to kill me the way he killed my girlfriend. And he plays a tape recording of her voice as he's getting ready to kill her, and she begins to realize that she's going to be killed. And I'll never forget it because I didn't plan anything. I didn't plan what I was going to do. I know what I would have normally done. I would have played fear. That's what you play. You're going to be killed. You realize this is the guy that's going to kill me, and you play fear. I listened to the tape recording, and I listened to her voice, and something completely different happened to me.
Nothing's going to happen.
Okay. Why don't you make yourself comfortable? Why don't you take your clothes
I am
off?
perfectly comfortable. Just put your head down. You have this lovely, long, blonde hair. Turn your head. Like that.
No!
I heard her voice, and I began to think of all of the women that had been hurt by men, all of the women that have been victims of sexual violence because of men. I thought about it and reacted to it in a very, very different way because of the different feelings that I had, the empathy that I had for women that had come through my understanding of feminism, and I wept. And I think it's one of the strongest scenes that I've ever done because it's very unexpected.
It also impressed the man whose opinion of her mattered most.
I'm in awe.
Really?
I'm in awe of both of them. Jane not only is one of the most incredible actresses I've ever seen, and I have to say that I'm not surprised because I saw her do things early before she'd committed herself that I thought if she ever does want to, she's going to make it. But when I saw Clute as an example, I couldn't wait to sit and talk to her. And this was not father-daughter, this is actor-actor. Where did it come from? How did that happen to you? What did you know? And we're talking actor talk. And when I realized that the scene that had knocked me out was an improvisation, which I couldn't do if I was paid money to do it. I just can't. I have to have the written word and a director and help me a lot. They got to this scene, and the director knew what he wanted, but it wasn't written. And he talked to Jane about it. He says, just give me a moment. And this came out in an improvisation and just tore you apart. Anyway, she's not only this incredible actress, but she's the activist that you know her to be. And I'm in nothing but sympathy with.
You're proud of that part of her, right?
Yeah, I'm part of it, only in as much as I'm in sympathy.
Yes.
It's not in me to be an activist, just in my makeup. I'm not, she's extrovert, I'm very introvert. It's impossible, it would be impossible for me to get up, as much as my heart might be full and my head full of a cause, to face an audience in my character to talk about it. I couldn't do that. I'm in awe that she does to 5 people or 5,000 people, and is good at it and feels deeply.
That interview came 3 years after Jane's notorious visit to North Vietnam, where she caused outrage amongst many Americans by having her photograph taken whilst laughing and sitting on a Viet Cong anti-aircraft gun. The incident earned her the name of Hanoi Jane, and even years later, some have never forgiven her. Jane later claimed she was set up for propaganda reasons, but still called it a lapse of sanity that she will apologize for her whole life. The 1978 film Coming Home made some amends. It looked at the plight of servicemen returning from Vietnam and was the first film made by Jane's own company. It earned her a second Best Actress Oscar, but more importantly for her, won praise from many soldiers who had been left severely injured by the conflict. The following year, The China Syndrome was another hit, proving again it was a time when serious drama could do well at the box office.
Was the public in any danger at any time as a result of the accident? Now, I'm using that word very deliberately because I think that a good investigative reporter would do that.
But Jane's next political picture ended up becoming one of the era's best loved and most successful comedies, 9 to 5.
Violet, we're not criminal. You're not a criminal. It was an accident.
Well, we're criminals now. We've just stolen a corpse from a hospital. That sounds like criminal to me.
We'll take it back. We'll just turn around and take it back.
Oh, we'll get caught if we go back now. You think they're going to listen to us?
Would you two please stop arguing and think about where we can lay our hands on some cement?
It grew out of my understanding of the predicament of secretaries and wanting to show their situation and how difficult it was. And I started out making a serious film, but then one night I went to see Lily Tomlin in her one-woman show. I was smitten. Oh my God, the talent. And I thought, whoa, she's got to be one of the secretaries. And this is true, as I was driving home from the theater, I turned on the radio and it was Dolly Parton singing Two Doors Down. Bingo. Yeah. I thought, wow, Jane, Lily, and Dolly. But it's going to have to be a comedy.
After toppling the boss in 9 to 5 came On Golden Pond, a labor of love for the man she'd always looked up to. Previously a play, Jane bought the rights because its depiction of a troubled father-daughter relationship echoed that of her own and her father, Henry.
What I'd like to know is why you enjoy playing games.
Huh?
You seem to like beating people. I wonder why.
You got another chance, Bill. Another roll of the dice. Oh.
Was that a bit like it was with your father?
Yeah, but it happened a couple of years before the movie. By the time we got to the movie, we'd become friends. But it was a very interesting experience. I mean, here, I was the producer. I put it together for him. And I'd won 2 Academy Awards, and I went to work, and I confronted him, and I just felt like, this is the day he's going to discover that I don't really have talent, that it was all a mistake, and he's going to judge me the way I always felt judged. And, do we ever own our successes? I felt like I'm condemned no matter what I ever do in my life to go through life feeling that I haven't quite gotten there yet. And yet it was wonderful. I mean, it was really a very, very moving experience. And, what I found was someone who was still willing to just bare their soul and expose everything and be vulnerable and be scared and work hard and show up on time and be kind to the crew. And, a pro is a pro. And it was very, very moving.
On Golden Pond is often spoken of as reuniting you with your father. Did you need reuniting by that stage?
There was a scene where they're playing Purchese, him and Hepburn, and I'm reading a magazine, and he's making fun of the fact that I don't like to play. And I turn around to him and say, why do you like to beat people so much? What is it about you that makes you want to win? And it was this very brief verbal exchange of hostility between the two of us. We shot his close-up first, No, we shot my close-up first, with all the lights in my eyes, just like now. And I couldn't see his eyes, and so I asked to have a light put on his face. I said, I need to see your eyes, Dad. Okay, we did my close-up, it went fine. It was his turn. And just before we shot it, I said, is it okay, Dad? Can you see my eyes? And he said, I don't need to see your eyes. I'm not that kind of actor. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I felt just like I used to feel when I was a little girl and he would put me down. And yet, and this is so typical of actors, the other half of my brain was saying, this is fabulous. This is exactly what he does to Chelsea, the character. And there's a scene when she says to my mother, I'm a grown-up woman. I have a business. I'm a professional woman. Why is it that I come here and I feel like a fat little girl? So it's like that kind of schizophrenic experience. And afterwards, the minute the scene was over, Hepburn came and took me in her arms. She said, he doesn't even know how he hurt you, and it's all right. She said, Tracy used to do that to me all the time. When we were doing a love scene and it was his close-up, he told me to go home, that he didn't need me there. They just don't understand.
I don't think I've ever grown up on Golden Pond. Do you understand?
No, I don't think I understand.
Doesn't matter. I act like a big person everywhere else. I'm in charge of Los Angeles, and I come here, I feel like a little fat girl.
That's just because your father said that.
On Golden Pond, won her father his first Oscar, which Jane collected on his behalf. It was also an unexpected blockbuster, and arguably the last truly significant role of her career. The rest of the 80s saw her focusing more on her charitable work, made possible by the phenomenal success of her exercise videos. And after 1990, she didn't act at all for 15 years. The film that she returned for was the 2005 comedy Monster-in-Law, thought by many to be a surprisingly lightweight choice. But Jane had her reasons.
And I thought, gosh, I wonder if I could have fun again. And I did.
You did?
I did, I really did.
So you might do it again?
I'd like to do it a few more times, Nobody's pounding on my door, but, I have other things that it's not the center of my life, but I'd have fun to do it again, yeah.
And she's been having fun in films, and most notably on television. In the comedy series Grace and Frankie, which reunited Jane with her 9 to 5 co-star Lily Tomlin. She's still a chameleon, but a calmer one. Looked on as a trailblazer, a role model, and an important actress, her history means not everyone is going to love her like they seemingly loved her dad. But after all these years, there's a sense that Jane Fonda is now someone many of us have grown very fond of.